Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Monday, October 5th, 2020. Thanks for tuning in, guys. It's been a while. It's been a very, very productive month for us here at the Grand Solar Minimum channel. We're trying to keep up with everything. As you guys know, we are working on a project, and it's taking some time, that's for sure. But we're definitely getting really close and getting the house ready for this winter. And what I mean by that is insulating it good, and I mean good. So, but hopefully we can get back to a more normal schedule. Anyways, back to space weather news here on the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Our solar wind speeds are coming in at 353.8 kilometers per second with a density of 7.3. We are now 9 days in a row without sunspots. 199 days for 2020 without sunspots. Now, back in July, I had made an announcement that I didn't believe, because of all the sunspot or the solar cycle 25 talk about how it begun, and we were seeing the activity. It was sunspot here, sunspot there, sunspot here, you know, one at a time, but the sun was active for a period of time in July through August. And then we went on a 35-day streak without sunspots, broken up by one that kind of fizzled in and out for a couple of days and then finally stayed away. And as you see it right now, looking at our sun, it is that bright spot that is in the western limb turning away from Earth, AR 2773. And now we're quiet. 9 straight days. I was under the impression that we were not going to see more than 200 days without sunspots in 2020. That is imminent to happen now. And it's only October 5th. In fact, I saw this on SPACEWEATHER.com, a little article here that says the strangest spotlessness of the sun. On September 15th, NOAA and NASA announced that the new solar cycle 25 has begun. Since then, the sun has been blank, totally spotless, almost 90% of the time. The sustained lack of sunspots shows that solar minimum is not over. Solar cycle 25 is still too weak to break its icy grip on solar activity. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there, especially those of you out there in the AGW, who celebrate every time that there's a CME or a sunspot of any kind, or even just a magnetic filament release. And you guys jump up and down and say, yeah, Grand Solar Minimum just got canceled on a B-class flare. Well, these things take time. We've seen it for the last 3.5 years of the decline, how long it took to get to where we are now. So it's not as if the sun is going to wake up and go right into a maximum. It's going to build up just like it built down, or I should say stepped down in solar activity. So here we are. It's October. Many of you, including myself, thought that maybe solar cycle 25 was beginning. And hey, you know, 155 days of spotless days in 2020 is still a lot, considering if you look at the history, the last solar minimum going back to 2006, 70 days of sunspots, or days without sunspots, 70. 2017, you got to go 11 years from the date. Okay, so 2017, 104 days that were spotless. So already a 9% increase from 2006 to 2017. And then it really got, I mean, it declined so fast. When you looked at 2007 was 152 days without sunspots. 2018 was 221 days without sunspots. So again, a 19% increase of spotless days. And then 2008. We peaked out in 2008. Now, the last minimum, 268 days without sunspots. 11 years from now, 2019, 281 days. So again, not a big of margin, but still 6% more spotless days in this solar cycle minimum compared to the previous minimum back in 2006 through 2009. And then again, now here we are, 2020, and let's look at what 2010 was. 2010 had 51 days. So in the last solar minimum, when it was coming out of a minimum and heading back towards a maximum cycle, we saw solar activity in 2011. Almost immediately, or I'm sorry, 2010. 51 days. 11 years from this 2010 number, you got to go here to 2020, 2021. And we are going to be right at over, what's going to be over 200. So as we're exiting this solar minimum, it is obviously extended further from the last one that we had back in 2006 through 2009, 2010. And solar max began to pick up in 2011, 2012, 13, 14, 15. So, you had a good 5 years of some kind of solar activity. But I wanted to bring this up to you guys just to compare this solar cycle and this minimum and how deep this minimum really is, guys. All right? So we're 140 more days spotless than we were in the previous minimum at this point. We were already seeing spots on a daily basis at this point of the minimum. That's not the case right now. That is not the case. So we will continue to monitor this. And really, it's interesting to see how many more days are we going to go spotless. And I know I've kind of rambled on here, but it's kind of important. Let's go over to thegrandsolarminimum.com and we'll show you a few more stats of the sun. KP indices have spiked up recently to 4, by the way. That's the 24-hour max. But solar activity, as far as flares, it's pretty much flatline right now. Back to quiet. So when's that next sunspot coming, right? I don't know. We're already 9 days in right now. And those of you who have followed this channel for a while, you know what this is. This is our crystal ball. All right. Let me try to zoom back out where we can see all the numbers here. This is our crystal ball for sunspots, right? And the 0 represents Earth facing. You got to go to the 0, 0. That's your Earth facing. All right. This is the sunspot that was mainly an issue on the eastern limb and then kind of fizzled out as it was Earth facing and turning away. So we've been 9 days without a sunspot. That's what a sunspot would look like if we could see one coming at us. And we don't see anything. Here's the eastern limb at negative 90. Okay, so from here to here, we're nothing. Maybe something down here could maybe flare up, I guess. I mean, probably not. We've seen this all minimum long, but look how weak it is in the corona across the center, which could be an indication of more coronal holes. And we have seen spontaneous development of sunspots that way as well. But right now, we're putting this all together. And why am I going on about the lack of sunspots right now in the beginning of this cycle? NASA did a press conference not too long ago, I think September 5th, if I'm not mistaken. And they, or the 15th, it may have been, I don't know, somewhere around there. But they announced about solar cycle 25 had begun. And it has. I mean, really, since we started seeing solar cycle 25 sunspots since, early or late winter. But they were talking about how that you can kind of gauge a solar cycle by its beginning, on how it starts. Okay? And what I mean by that is, if it gets off to an active start right away, lots of sunspots, that's an indication of a very strong and active solar cycle. The longer the cycle takes to get going, the more indication that this is going to be a weak cycle. And right now, if you compared this year, where we are right now with solar activity, to 2010, at that point we were coming out of the minimum and starting the uptick towards the maximum cycle. There were only 51 days without sunspots. We have already had 140 more days than that. Hell, 148 more days, spotless days, than we had at the same point at the end of the previous minimum. So therefore, we are seeing a very slow start to solar cycle 24, because if you go to SPACEWEATHER.com and you look at their little chart here on the edge, and this is where I get the data. 2006 was 70 days, all right? 2017 is what you compare it to. So 06 to 17, 07 to 18, 08 to 19, and 09 to 20. Oh, okay. So 2010 to 2020, and then 51 days out. Nonetheless, we are still trending upwards as far as how deep this sunspot cycle has been. So I misspoke there. It's not as deep, but the string of years, of multiple years of being 200 days without sunspots, is impressive on its own. And possibly just because we've already seen the bigger uptick in sunspot activity earlier, maybe that's why we're seeing the longer days without sunspots continue to carry on longer. So solar cycle 25 predicted to be equal strength to 24. I'm saying, just based on how late solar cycle is getting started, I believe that this will come in lower than solar cycle 24. And people like Starman, who have predictions right around 91, 87, I think, if I misquoted you, my fault, but I think that's a more realistic peak number of the smooth sunspot count. At this point, this cycle is showing me that it's taken a lot longer to get started than it should. And which is, it's mind-boggling, because people like Lisa Upton are saying that there's no indication that the amplitude of the sun's output is going to continue to decline. That's over. We're not heading towards a Maunder type minimum. And we know that's just not true. We've talked about solar cycles before on this channel. We've talked about how 25 is going to be weaker than 24. And so far, in the early beginning, solar cycle 25 is definitely a lot weaker than, say, the beginning of solar cycle 24. Definitely stronger in the beginning of solar cycle 24 than it is now. And those are just the facts, guys. I'm not trying to distort anything. Those are just the facts. Less sunspots in this solar cycle at the end of 24 and the beginning of 25 already. Weaker than 23, obviously. 25 is showing signs that it is indeed going to continue to be uneventful here. And we will see probably what they'll say the deepest minimum from this current cycle that we're in right now in the past 175, 190 years. And then, of course, by the time we get to 26 or 2028, we'll be hearing that 200-year type minimum talk once again as well. So buckle up. Lots to talk about, lots to go over, and first I'll start with Tropical Storm Gamma. Now, that is in the Yucatan. It claims 6 lives and it stalls out near the coast. It made landfall near the Yucatan Peninsula, Mexico, over the weekend with hurricane-force winds and very heavy rain, claiming the lives of at least 6 people, forcing thousands to evacuate. It did make landfall with 70-mile-an-hour winds, and I think the storm at this point right now is moving at 2 miles an hour west. So very slow-moving storm. Pressure on that right now is 999 millibars, so not very strong. But the Gulf, once again, kind of waking up, as you can see there, is Delta, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. Storm Alex hits Europe with extremely heavy rain and destructive winds. Made landfall in France on October 2nd, 2020. With powerful winds and extremely heavy rains, it caused severe floods in France and Italy, with some of them described as the worst in living memory. At least 2 people have died and 34 remain missing at the time. Now, a red weather warning was issued for the Alps department, where Alex dropped around 19.69 inches in some areas just in 24 hours. The only time the region saw more rain than that was on October 3rd, 2015, when floods left 20 people dead and around the French Riviera city. Wow. So, big storm over there. We kind of talked about this on the last broadcast. Unfortunately, that was a week ago. And this was one of the bigger storm systems that we were watching. And it did bring a punch, unfortunately. All right, let's talk about Dr. Roy Spencer's work here. And I know we're a few days past the 1st. It's the 5th. But anyway, we still need to talk about this, right? Temperatures. Now, what's funny about this is that I was trying to make a prediction on our last broadcast. I said, I expected to be between 0.33 and 0.38. And then I said, but watch, because I made that prediction of a drop, it's going to go up to 0.53 or something silly like that. Well, I jinxed it. 0.57 to be exact. And that's unexpected, in my opinion. And I'll tell you why, because I've always kind of followed this. Joe Bastardi has described these as plateaus of temperatures. Okay, here's a plateau here, and then in the next few years we jump up here, and this is our next plateau of warming, and then we jump up, and then here's our next plateau. So what does that mean? The plateaus. Well, as you can tell, most of these have a double peak, and then they drop, and they go back up with another peak, and then they drop again, and then they plateau, drop. The question is, how far is this drop going to be? Will this plateau continue, or will are we starting to see the slight bend of the curve of the beginning of the cooling that we're going to see over the next 30 years? That's the bigger question. So, is 0.57 a big deal? No. Because we know that we're heading into a much colder temperature type of the year right now here in the Northern Hemisphere. Plus, we've been reporting on Southern Hemisphere snow and cold still in areas that aren't really supposed to be cold right now and snowing. So an extended winter in some parts in the Southern Hemisphere, and I do believe we are going to start seeing some pretty cold air in the near future here, especially as early as mid to late month. We'll go over that here in a bit on GFS. But yeah, so 0.57 above baseline, and we are at a plateau here that I believe that Joe Bastardi is kind of catching on to, and I kind of see his reasoning. So if that's the case, where we're at in this plateau of this level of warming, we are due for some cooling next, and perhaps not as much on the peak side. Maybe we start to see things leveling out slowly, just like it has slowly, barely gone up. I mean, since 79. We're not even a full degree above baseline warming since 79. So everybody just pump the brakes. And while we're talking about warming, I think tonight I might upset some of you. I might. But it's got to be said. It's got to be said because there are so many things. I made the mistake looking down at the chat, and very enthusiastic Gardner says, I think the NFL has a ploy to distract the masses. How else do you explain the Browns being 3-1? I mean, come on, folks. You're probably right. And, you know, yeah. You're absolutely right. Good stuff there. All right. So moving along here to climate change talk, guys. I want to talk about this because I have to say it. What's up with that? Everybody, we love this channel. We love this website. No Trick Zone is another reliable, great site for cooling and whatnot, for papers on cooling. But as a person, I try to stay in the middle of things. I don't want to be too far right. I'm definitely, I wouldn't say that I would ever been in the left side of things, but I'm more of the middle though. You know what I mean? Like I just try to see both sides of everything. And I have. And we all know that CNN and CNBC and the Weather Channel and all these other mainstream media channels will tell you that humans are causing climate change. That humans are causing climate change. And, you know, good for what's up with that, for catching them and calling them out and CNN, oh, blah, blah, blah. They did this and they said that. Yeah, I like these articles. I like showing people how fake news reports on climate change. But then I see things like this. And what I'm about to show you guys is an example of what could have been but wasn't. And this is what frustrates me the most. So I'm going to play about a couple minutes of this video here. Not the whole thing. We don't need to see the whole thing. I mean, that night was absolute disgrace. Both of them. Anyway, let's watch this here. I want you guys to pay attention.
The forest fires in the West are raging now. They have burned millions of acres. They have displaced hundreds of thousands of people. When state officials there blame the fires on climate change, Mr. President, you said, I don't think the science knows. Over your 4 years, you have pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord. You have rolled back a number of Obama environmental records. What do you believe about the science of climate change? And what will you do in the next 4 years to confront it?
I want to pause it. Because remember, President Trump has done a good job at rolling back regulations. We're burning more coal and natural gas and helping with some of these energy costs. We are still trying to find ways to make it clean because we believe in that the air and the water is polluted by man. So therefore, we should try to be more responsible when burning fossil fuels, at least trying to be a little cleaner in that department. The question was, what is your beliefs? And when you support a president or any politician who says, I'm rolling back regulations, I don't think scientists know the reason why climate change, you expect his answer to be about the sun drives the climate. Our climate goes through natural cycles from the sun, and that man barely plays the role that my opponent on the left wants you to believe that is the main reason why for climate change. So let's find out if that's what he says.
I want crystal clean water and air. I want beautiful clean air. We have now the lowest carbon. If you look at our numbers right now, we are doing phenomenally. But I haven't destroyed our businesses. Our businesses aren't put out of commission. if you look at the Paris Accord, it was a disaster from our standpoint.
Agreed.
And people are actually very happy about what's going on because our businesses are doing well. As far as the fires are concerned, you need forest management in addition to everything else. The forest floors are loaded up with trees, dead trees that are years old, and they're like tinder, and leaves and everything else. You drop a cigarette in there, the whole forest burns down.
Another
You've got
good
to have
point.
Forest management.
What do you
You've got to have
believe?
cuts.
What do you believe about the science of climate change, sir?
I believe that we have to do everything we can to have immaculate air, immaculate water, and do whatever else we can that's good. You know, we're planting 1 billion trees, the Billion Tree Project, and it's very
Do you
exciting
believe
for a lot of people.
that human pollution, greenhouse gas emissions contributes to the global warming of
I
this
think
planet?
a lot of things do, but I think to an extent, yes. I think to an extent, yes. But I also
Okay. So there's President Trump telling the world that to an extent, yes, I believe that human pollution is causing global warming. Now, I know there's a lot of you that's going to defend him on this one, and that's fine. And that's your right. But what I'm trying to tell you is that he had the opportunity to give substance to the answer. Chris Wallace asked him 3 times, what do you believe in the science that tells you about climate change? And he started off on the right foot by talking about wanting clean air and clean water. I'm like, all right, I agree. Talks about pulling out of the Paris Climate Treaty. It was a disaster, yes. But again, no substance to why it was a disaster. No substance. He was talking about planting 1 billion trees. To me, I felt like he could have been talking about the sun controls our climate. What you've been told from my opponent and the left is false, that man causes climate change. It's been documented for centuries. The sun drives the climate. But that's where I feel like he's not the only one. Now, I'm not going to pick on Trump. There's one more that I want to show you. He's not the only one. And again, this is just lack of preparation. He knows that there's more to it in climate change. He knows that, but he's not prepared enough. And this was a huge opportunity to tell the world that the sun drives the climate, that climate change is natural, and that the sun causes climate change. That's all. Here's another one. Listen up.
You've been highly critical of the Green New Deal, but this is clearly not something that's being dismissed by young people in your state, some of them sleeping outside of your office in support of this. I'm wondering, do you believe in climate change? And do you believe that humans are contributing to a warming global?
I do. The question is, how do you address it?
Okay. I don't need to hear anymore. A Republican senator just admitted, and this is from, what's the date here? Where's the dates? That was March of 2019. And here we are, September 9th. It's been brought up again as well. Not once, but twice. Mitch McConnell now admits human-caused global warming exists. It breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that we don't have anybody in the government that really understands climate science. The Green New Deal is going to bring lots of jobs. That is true. That is true. It will bring lots of jobs. The question is, how long do those jobs last? How long before the system starts failing too much to where they have to start firing up the coal plants? Natural gas is back at it again. Now you have all these trillions of dollars of installations of green energy all over the country that could be abandoned within 10 to 12 years. So you got Governor Newsom banning sales of gasoline engines by 2035. Walmart's CEO, Doug McMillon, is now pledging to be carbon free by 2040. Stupid. waste more money on something that's not going to help anything, where he could be investing that money into paying his employees. That's what he needs to do. Invest that money into your employees. They're working in the middle of a pandemic every day, and they catch grief if they miss a day, no matter how bad it gets, or how bad the crowds are, how bad people don't want to wear their mask, or how bad people treat them. But yet Walmart is going to pledge carbon free by 2040 to do its part to fight climate change. Waste of money. We all know it. I mean, not just because we're haters of global warming or anything, but there's something called a grand solar minimum that's coming up. That's started right now. That's going to affect TSI. We're going to have more cloud coverage, less TSI. These solar panels are not going to absorb the energy like they would have 10, 20 years ago. I promise you that. Look, if our magnetic field is weaker, like they're saying it's going to be, they're expecting it to be 70% weaker by the 2030s than what it is right now. Can you imagine the saturation of cosmic radiation in our atmosphere? Henrik Svensmark will be considered a god at that point with his cloud nucleation theory. So again, it's heartbreaking because I know a lot of you swing conservative, and the EPA regulation rollbacks make sense. So you think, okay, these people get it, so I'm going to continue to support them because they get it. They get the climate science, right? And then you see this. Senate Leader McConnell. Humans cause global warming. Donald Trump. I'll give him credit. He said to an extent. So that's a very vague response, and you can say whatever you want. At that point, you can say, well, to an extent. I mean, that could have been, well, I only meant like 0.114. I didn't mean like 0.50. So it's a vague answer. It's a cheap, but it's a way to balance act. You can't come out against the consensus. Remember, if you do, you're a whack job. You're pseudoscience. You're accused of being a climate denier. And that's the crazy part, is that nobody that follows this topic is denying climate change. We know the climate's changing. We know why the climate's changing. We know what's going to happen while the climate is changing. And we know that we can adapt and thrive through climate change. It's not the end of the world. Like the left wants to tell you, at least some of them, the Green New Deal policy. I shouldn't say all left, because I know Democrats don't support the Green New Deal. I do know there's some that are strongly against it. The Green New Deal is radical. All it is an economy changer. And I hate to say it, it feels like it's going to happen because of how we are right now with the economy, the possibility of an election, changing leaders in the White House. I mean, I don't even want to think about it. But my point of showing you guys this stuff was to let you know that it's not just the left. The Republicans don't know either. Here's a map. Here's how Republicans think about climate change. Now this is a good stat. 30 to 40% Republicans on this map represented here. Actually, the lighter is 50%. The darker is near 30%. So the darker the states, that's the lower part. The lighter the state, that's the higher part of Republicans believing that humans don't cause climate change. Only 50%? I mean, here's my issue with that. If you're if you're a Republican senator and you're in that 50% that believes human causes global warming, but you just voted yes for a bill that means more coal to be burned and more natural gas to be drilled and, more fossil fuels to be burned for energy, how does that make sense? You canceled yourself out. So it's impressive to see that number that high, actually, 50%. And then yet half of Republicans say that climate change is happening with strongest support on the coast and in places where climate effects are now being felt. Again, I think this map is confusing. They say 60% along the coast say it's happening. That's not an admission to global warming. That could be a mixed number of people who believe in, say, solar forcing type cycles, sun drives the climate type stuff. Does it really sound crazy to say the sun drives the climate? What happens when the sun goes down at night as we continue to sit in the dark for hours and hours and hours? The temperature drops, right? 10 to 20 degrees in a matter of hours. Yet humans contribute 0.0004% of the CO2 in the atmosphere, which to me, no way that 0.0004% CO2 causes warming of 10 to 20 degrees. In fact, we know that's not the case. We're talking about saving global temperatures not exceeding that 2 degrees Celsius mark. Which, by the way, when you talk to the AGW and they want to tell you we're at 1.5 right now, show them this. This is, and look, the reason why I go with the satellite data is because NOAA has been caught red-handed putting their temperature gauges right on the tarmac of an airport, right on a highway, right on top of a slate roof in the middle of the summer, and has the balls to call in the record high temperature today. Well, you won't believe what happened here on the blacktop. So let's go with the satellite based, all right? There's an error of, I'm sure there is a margin of error with these, but the satellites that they use here at UAH, John Christie and Dr. Roy Spencer, are the most in the middle as far as like trying to be not so biased of a cooler temperature reading, but right there in the middle between where the exaggerated amount NOAA says we are and where we really are. This comes right in the middle, if you ask me, right down the middle. And I think this is a lot closer to the reality of how much our global temperature has warmed and just how much. It's not basically AGW saying this is a full degree lower than what they're saying it's happening right now. Satellite-based temperatures show that is not the case. So do your research. Check these guys out before you vote for them, man. Try to find candidates out there that are really into the science of a policy, any policy, whether it's climate change or drinking water, whatever. We got to stop voting for people who just say they think they know and then they don't know. Democrats and Republicans alike. It's embarrassing. I was hoping that one side or the other would step it up and make it clear. And I hate doing this, but he had the best opportunity. He had a spotlight of millions of viewers. The chance to say the cycles are natural and the sun controls the climate. And this type of thing happens and you know, I get it. It's like you have to fall on a sword if you want to admit that and you're someone of credibility. He's in a re-election season. He can't come out and go balls to the walls 100% against AGW. In fact, him and his Republican friends are trying to get some votes by saying or acknowledging that humans cause global warming. And that's sad. That's sad. So what do? Well, we continue to write our senators and congressmen. Hell, let's email them. Send them some links. Maybe we have to educate these lawmakers. Maybe we have to come up with presentations that speak on this, because apparently they don't know. And there's tons of PhD professors out there who are teaching about solar cycles and the sun's magnetic field and how it affects every planet in the solar system and what it does to Earth. These are peer-reviewed studies, and they're coming out more and more. In fact, go over to the No Trick Zone. If you want to, if you have somebody out there who is constantly challenging you about AGW, just pull all of your papers from No Trick Zone. They have a huge database of peer-reviewed papers that have been published by PhD scientists all over the world that prove cooling. And that's where you tell people the science is not settled. The science is not settled. Point blank. All right, let's talk about Tropical Storm Delta. It's rapidly strengthening over the Caribbean on Monday. AccuWeather forecasters are warning that the storm could strike the central Gulf Coast of the United States as a powerful hurricane to the end of the week. These storms are not coming in as strong at this time of the year. We are expected to see landfall somewhere in the very early hours of Friday. It's possible it could be a Category 2. It may flirt with a Category 3. Delta was upgraded from tropical depression status at 8 a.m. this morning. Just 100 miles south of Jamaica, Delta is the 25th tropical storm of 2020, and it continues at a record pace and even well ahead of the notorious 2005 season. The only other season which requires the use of Greek letters in the alphabet for storm names was in 2005. 6 Greek letters were used that year, and the season concluded with Zeta. Well, we have Gamma and Delta, and then after that, we don't know. And you're right, we are at a record pace. So we had several days of no activity in the Atlantic and the Gulf, and now we have 2 storms, Gamma and Delta, but Delta looks to be the most threatening right now. And Delta's track is actually quite interesting as you take a look at some of the spaghetti models already being put out there. And boy, is Louisiana and Alabama, Mississippi taking it on the chin this year when it comes to hurricanes and flooding. Now, what are we expecting with rainfall? Are we looking at a very, very heavy rainfall forecast? I haven't seen, and again, it's still too far out, but I haven't seen anything definitive yet. But here's the idea right now of the winds. 100 to 120 miles per hour, that's going to be, right now, looks like it's going to be near New Orleans. So the strong winds are going to last through the southern part of Mississippi and stay near 100 miles an hour through Mississippi and parts of western Alabama as well, and the very western part of the Florida Panhandle. Here's where we might see flooding rain. Again, the orange is a high chance. So they're not really putting any numbers out here. They're just kind of giving you an idea of it's not going to be catastrophic to a point of what we saw here in the last several storms. Now, 12 inches is going to be the max for this storm. So it looks like we have a widespread area that could receive 4 to 8 inches of rain. And this goes all the way up through the mid-Atlantic states. Richmond, VA, when this storm moves out, you will be a part of this. And so here's the tracking of Delta and its impacts. In fact, let's go ahead and talk about it on the GFS Outlook. And we can track it down here in the Gulf, as you see, coming into the Gulf of Mexico by Wednesday, October 7th. And it approaches. Now, GFS has it tracking a little bit further west on the latest update. This storm, the stronger side of it, is going to be right over New Orleans. And just depending on the movement of this, we're going to have to watch that one closely. If they get the most rain, we already know they're below sea level. This storm keeps its act together for a little while, goes through Mississippi, parts of western Tennessee and western Kentucky, and believe it or not, up the Ohio River Valley. Watch out Cincinnati, Dayton, Lima, Columbus, Cleveland, Medina. You guys are going to get hit with a tropical-like system by Monday, October 12th. And then look at that low-pressure system behind it, dropping down into the United States. That's snow by the second week of October, starting to fly in parts of the Rockies, the northern plain states, Alberta and BC. You're starting to see the snow. Now we're starting to see these low-pressure-like systems that we would see in the winter. Just above us in Canada, Manitoba gets a little bit there. Northern Minnesota, that's October 14th. Another big system moves to the northeast. High pressure trying to dominate here for a few days, keeping it dry. That colder air, though, is trying to make its appearance here by the late October, folks. We could see snowflakes flying in the upstate part, the Adirondacks. Snow by October 19th. Possible to be considered. That's going to be an overnight system, by the way, folks. More cold air across the northern plain states by late October, indicating snow is going to be possible for Minnesota, parts of Wisconsin, the upper part of Michigan, which has already seen a couple of snow events, nothing major. And then right here at the end of this run, this high pressure and this dip in the jet stream allows me to believe that we are going to see some pretty cold temperatures to wind down the month of October. So let's take a look at these temperatures. Let's get you up to date here. There we are, Monday, October 5th. This is daytime highs. Not bad. Not bad at all. Mid-60s across this capital region here in New York. Mid-60s across the Ohio Valley. 83 degrees near McCook, Nebraska. 79 in central Kansas. Still not as bad, but still warm in Texas. Parts of Texas, 84 degrees. All right, let's move a little further here. Tuesday, a little bit cooler overnight. Nice temperatures during the day, still warm. And then we start to see things cool off a little bit on Thursday for the Northeast and the Great Lakes. Not a lot. 40s and 50s, that's it. And then we get the 60s back by the weekend time. A little bit of a brief warm-up across the Central Plains, but watch this. Some cold air coming from the north. I mean, it blows in like Kenneth Copeland blowing out the COVID-19. And all that cold air just blows right into the northwest and in the northern plains. And it really starts to get intense here as we get towards the 18th of October, where we are teetering. Temperatures in the low 40s, upper 30s, as this pocket of cold air is trying to make its way down. And look at the north, the northeast, the northwest, the northern plains, the Great Lakes. Highs in the 40s, guys. Highs in the 40s, overnight lows in the 30s, and then we start to see the 20s and even colder temperatures starting to dip in to, look at that. That's overnight lows for October 21st. 30% of the United States will be freezing, below freezing. We're talking low 20s across the Dakotas. So that colder air, and look at that, that's your daytime highs on October 21st. Upper 40s, low 50s across the Northeast, 30s across the Northern Plains. Minnesota and Wisconsin and upper Michigan are going to see the low 40s, high 30s, and across the Ohio Valley, 40s and 50s. Just a sharp cool down. And again, it's only October. So we got a lot of cold air to watch in the near future. Let's take a look over here across the pond as they dealt with Alex. And Alex, you see, is moving out. Still rain in the area, snow in the Alps, and more rain that will come towards France, Germany. UK will get hit with another system by Friday, October 9th, and that will bring some moderate rain. High pressure tries to settle in just to the west of it, but it steers another low pressure system towards Ireland and Wales, and into the UK by mid-month, October 15th. Looks like a pretty decent sized system. Also, keeping an eye in France once again. They got quite a bit of rain from Alex. Some spots, like I said, hit 19 inches of rain in 24 hours. So it looks like a continued rainy pattern for our friends across the pond here in the UK throughout the month of October. Now, let's see if we're going to see the kind of temperatures. That's not what I want. We don't want to hype it. All right, here we go. Let's go back here. Let's check out temperatures for you guys out in the UK and other European countries. Again, 50s and 60s for the most part across the UK and Europe. A little bit of a warm up here closer to the middle of October, and then some cooler air is reinforced as we see more storm systems. Overnight lows in the freezing marks across the Alps, daytime highs in the 40s and 50s, 60s as well across France, 70s in the more western part. UK, you get a spurt of nice warm weather on the 14th, and then some cooler air tries to work its way in by the 18th of October for England. Things starting to feel a little bit more like fall for England and most of the UK, actually. France, Germany, Denmark, temperatures regulating right around in the 30s and 40s for the overnight lows. And, of course, daytime highs in the low 50s, upper 40s for you all out there. Let's take a look at our La Nina watch. And right now, the temperature out there in that region is coming in at 0.790. So we are right now at a weak to moderate La Nina if we had to rate it yet. But this is only the beginning. So with that being said, lack of sunspots, we're in a La Nina pattern. We should see some pretty chilly weather this year, some cold weather. And I do expect some pretty big snows across the Great Lakes, the Northeast, Northern Plains, and across the Midwest as well. And we can't rule out some ice storms for the southern states and the mid-Atlantic. So this winter maybe will be a little bit more eventful just because of the La Nina that's in play, the warmer temperatures in the Atlantic tropics, and a couple other factors that should bring us more snow than what we saw last year. And also, I think on the next broadcast, I will bring up ice accumulations up at the pole as we will start to see the growth in the Arctic ice once again. The hysteria over melting ice will stop here shortly. Mari, would you like to say hello to anybody today? No.
We have a super chat.
A super chat? A donation?
No, if I have it up anymore, 'cause I'm only on my...
I want to say hi to Knife Collector, Ghost Mountain, Dana Green, Edward, hello, Veg. Good to see you guys.
We got a super chat by Robert Hartley.
Thank you, Robert.
And he wanted you to read what he said, but I don't really know where it is right now. I don't have it in front of me. But it was something about Prince Charles and the elite. You know, the powers that be. That's what people were on about, talking, you know, the one percenters and all that. We were talking about the wealth distribution system with AGW and all that, Jake. It's always interesting. We actually have a great video that sort of breaks down that wealth distribution, don't we? In one of our main playlists on our channel.
That's right, we do. You're right. Guys, our YouTube channel has tons of information on it. And Mari and I have been doing this channel for about 4 years now. Actually, right now marks 4 years for us for Grand Solar Minimum. There's things that sometimes that I don't recall we did, and I'm glad I went back and looked. There's a lot of useful information, interviews that we've done. If you guys aren't subscribed, please subscribe to the channel, as we will try to continue more frequent updates here on the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Guys, that's going to do it for us tonight. Thank you once again for tuning into the Grand Solar Minimum channel. We hope everyone is staying safe. We'll talk soon, guys. Take care.
Do you like the show? Give us a thumbs up. Want to support us more? Share to your favorite social media platform. Buy a t-shirt or become a Patreon. All links are in the description below.